Well, welcome to Compass North Fort Worth. We are one church in thousands of locations. My name is Nate. I'm the pastor here at the North Fort Worth campus. So glad that you're with us today. So glad you're worshiping with us, wherever that might be from. In fact, right now in the chat section, tell us where you're joining us from today. And you know, if this is your first time, we'd love to connect with you. And so right now, if you're watching full screen, go ahead and minimize that and click on the link in the chat section so you can fill out our digital connection card, or you can text the word new NFW to 94000. You know, we'd love to get to know you, and we want to send you a gift. So I just want to say this as we begin. We're glad that you're joining us today. I would encourage you to give us the next 6 weeks. I promise you'll be glad that you did. Well, I want to go back a couple of months as we begin today to the day of March 11, 2020. Do you know why I chose that day? I'll give you a second to think about it. That's the day, in an instant, everything changed here in the United States. That night, I remember an ESPN update coming across my phone saying that the NBA had postponed the game between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Utah Jazz because two players from the Jazz, Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, well, both of those guys had tested positive for COVID-19. And with that news, all the games were postponed, and by the next day, the NBA had indefinitely suspended their season. Major League Baseball would do the same. My favorite tournament of the year, the NCAA tournament, got canceled. Schools got postponed. Kids were happy at first, and even across all of our campuses at Compass on that weekend, services got moved online for what we hoped would only be for a few weeks. Now, I don't know about you, but I didn't see it coming. I'd heard about coronavirus affecting other countries and even impacting parts of the United States, but honestly, I didn't see it coming. I never imagined that over the past 2.5 months that things would have changed so much, and maybe you didn't either. Well, today we're kicking off this new series called We Didn't See It Coming, in which we want to talk about some of the things that we've all experienced, but maybe things that we never would have expected in our lifetime. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. What are some of the things that maybe you didn't expect during these past few months that maybe you've experienced? I know one of the things that I didn't expect, Tiger King. Maybe right now in the comment section, go ahead and share some of the things that you experienced that maybe you didn't expect. You know, as the teaching team began to think about this idea for this series, there have been some really incredible things that we believe we've learned, or we've been reminded of along the way that we want to share with you over the next 5 weeks. And I've got to say this, I am so excited about this new series. Now, before we begin today and dig in, let me just say this. I just want you to know how proud I am to be the pastor here at Compass North Fort Worth. I love our campus, and I love what God continues to do. You know, these past 10 weeks have created the single greatest disruptive inflection point in our lifetime, calling for this critical pivot in our lives. And pivot is something that we did as a church. It's something that we are continuing to do. And what I love is that our campus continues to roll with the punches, that we've had to get creative. And maybe you've heard that since we can't get back into Eaton High School right now, we're moving our in-person gatherings to Saturday nights at our Roanoke campus starting on June 6th at 5 p.m. I want you to join us in person if you feel comfortable on Saturday nights. If you're not ready, though, to join us in person, we'll still have our online gatherings as well on Saturday mornings at our regular times at 9 and 10:30, and so I hope that you'll join us for those. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking in all this. Is this the right plan, Pastor Nate? I got to say this. I don't know. You know, they never offered leading your church through a pandemic class in college, so this is all new to me as well. But you know what I've learned over the last 10 weeks? When the world pressed pause, we press play as a church. I learned that God cannot be stopped, that Compass North Fort Worth is this amazing campus, and that the church is still on the move. And so as we begin today, I want to take a look at some of the incredible things that God has been doing through Compass over these last 10 weeks.
Our top story, the new developments in the coronavirus.
As the coronavirus has
to the coronavirus outbreak.
Latest on the coronavirus pandemic.
All but a handful of states have issued stay-at-home orders
and urges people to stay home.
Social distancing protocols.
Stay-at-home order taking effect tonight as neighboring New Jersey joins in.
canceling gatherings, ordering residents to do their part and stay home.
When the world pressed pause, the church pressed play.
This is who we are. We are hope to people who are really struggling in times like today.
What if I told you that God was making you stronger right now? That our church was getting stronger? Would you believe it?
Like the season we're in right now, reminding me I'm not in control, but He is, and we're in this together.
The first thing that we learned in the midst of this pandemic. The first thing that we learned is this. The first thing we learned is that we didn't need a building to be the church. In fact, let that sink in for a minute. Over these past few months, we've definitely learned that we don't need a building to be the church. And really, this is something that, honestly, we should have already understood. But I think maybe we don't think this because we tend to equate the church with this physical location, but it's so much more than that. And I want to dig into that idea today. Now, from the week that I was born, my parents took me to a church building. I was in the nursery at not even a week old. And I'll say this, over the years of going to those buildings, I learned a lot. I learned songs that I still remember to this day. I memorized scripture verses, and I built great relationships. I even met my wife, Amanda, when we were in student ministry together. And so I'm grateful for the church buildings that I attended. But you know, there's something that I learned as a kid at church that I think the church got wrong. If you grew up going to church, maybe you were taught this as well. If you didn't grow up in the church, you're probably going to be thankful you missed out on what I'm going to share with you here in a minute. But there was this little rhyme and these hand motions that they used to teach us in Sunday school. I remember it went kind of like this. Our teachers would say, okay, everybody, lock your fingers like this. And so all the kids, we would do this. And then one of the teachers would say, okay, let me show you what the church is all about. And then they would say this, here's the church, here's the steeple, open the doors, and you see all the people. And there's a problem with this. Maybe for some of you, you've already figured this out. When you hear the word church, maybe your mind immediately goes to this same place, that it's a building that people come to. For some of you, maybe you grew up with this church that was a big white steeple on top, and it's where, in your mind, it's where people gather each and every week to worship, take communion, give an offering, and then listen to a really good message by a really tall, handsome guy. And then after doing that, walking out the doors and checking that off the box of what you're supposed to do for the week as a follower of Christ. I mean, when you hear the word church, that's what you think about. But maybe for someone here today, when you hear the word church, you kind of think of it like a social club or a gathering in which you've got to act a certain way or you got to have certain credentials to get in. That maybe for some of you, the thought of walking through the doors of the church, that scares you because you've gone to a church in the past and you feel like you'll be looked down on or judged, or you'll even be made to feel outcast or unwanted. Maybe like you've been able to watch from the comfort of your own home over these last couple of months with no worry about what other people might think about you. And so kind of you're digging this whole online experience. Actually, you're glad that we've been able to go online these past couple of months and because you've been searching. And so you're glad that there's been a place for you. Here's what I hope to show you today, though. what I hope to show you today is the church has always been meant to be more than a building, that Jesus never intended it for it to be this. Here's the church, here's the steeple, you open the doors and you see all the people. You see, the church was meant to be so much more than that, and I hope over these past 2 months you've seen that, and my prayer is that maybe you've experienced that as well. You see, that's the reality for us here at Compass North Fort Worth. If nothing else, we're learning that right now, aren't we? I mean, I want you to think about this, okay? Northwest ISD has suspended outside rentals for at least the foreseeable future. Even though gatherings have been permitted, our current location isn't an option, but that hasn't stopped Compass North Fort Worth from being the church that we're called to be. Like, is it convenient? Of course. But from the very beginning, the church was never meant to be about a building. It's always meant to be about the people. Now, if you've got a Bible or a Bible app on your smartphone or your tablet, I want you to turn with me to the book of Matthew, because it's in Matthew 16 that Jesus, he initially uses this word church. Now, to give you a little context, Jesus and his disciples, they've just arrived in this region called Caesarea Philippi. His popularity is soaring, but people are still trying to figure out who this guy Jesus is. Now, some say he was a prophet. Others thought he was just another teacher. Some saw him as a rabbi. Some thought he was who God had promised, but others, they just weren't quite sure. And so Jesus, he decides to settle things once and for all by asking the disciples who the people thought that he was. Now, the disciples, they give some different answers about who people thought Jesus was, but then Jesus asks his guys this question in verse 15. He's like, hey guys, that's great. I hear what you're saying, but who do you say I am? And that's when Peter, who is this guy who was really never afraid to speak up or be the first to take this challenge or to step out, he says this in verse 16. Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And then notice what it says next. Jesus replied, you are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. No, I say to you that you are Peter, which means rock. And upon this rock I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it. And this is where Jesus is like, ding, 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 winner, winner, chicken dinner. Simon, you are correct. And because of that, I am now calling you the Rock. And I don't mean Dwayne Johnson, WWE superstar. He says, you're going to be the rock on which the church is built. Now, this word church, this is a new thing. The church didn't exist at this time. Jesus was again predicting what was going to happen. What he was doing, he was predicting us. And what Jesus was saying here in these verses is that the church was something that was going to stand the test of time, and nothing would be able to destroy it. You know, in these past 2 months, I've seen that even more clearly. What I've seen is that the church is definitely, it did not need a building to be the church. What I've seen is that coronavirus would not be able to stop the church. What I've seen is that the stock market could not stop the church, that the inability to meet in a physical location would not stop the church, but the church would not only continue to be the church, but it would thrive in the midst of this pandemic. You know, it reminds me of these words of the early church in Acts 16, verse 5, which says this. It says, so the churches were strengthened in their faith, and they grew larger every day. If I'm honest with you today, one thing I think that this pandemic has done is it's strengthened us, just like the church in Acts. And I believe that we too have experienced some incredible growth and brand new opportunities. You know, through this season, we've created some incredible new partnerships in our communities. It's given us even more opportunities to point people to Christ. We've been able to partner with organizations like the Tarrant County Food Bank and Donation House and several other communities in our area to serve those in need. And it's allowed us to share the love of Christ with others. And this is what the church was always supposed to be about. When Jesus told Simon, your name is now Peter, and it's because of your faith and your actions that the church will not only be established, but it will grow. And what he was doing is he was calling Peter and he was calling his followers to be his hands and his feet. And Compass North Fort Worth, let me just say that is what he has called us to do as well. You know, in Matthew, when Jesus tells Peter that it is through him that the church will begin, the Greek word that Jesus uses here is this word ecclesia. Now, I want you to understand this word. Ecclesia isn't referring to a bricks and mortar location. Actually, it's not even a religious term, but instead, ecclesia meant a gathering or an assembly of people called out for a specific purpose. And so, understand what Jesus is saying here. He's saying, I am building my own assembly of people who have one specific purpose or foundation. And he's saying, and that foundation will be upon me. And so when the church originally began after Jesus' death, it was a movement. It was people gathering together for a specific purpose, which was to spread the message of Jesus to the ends of the earth. In other words, what Jesus was doing, he was calling us out. He was calling us to continue doing the ministry that he had been doing when he was here walking along this earth. And after he would leave this earth and ascend back into heaven, that's what he was calling us to do. From the very beginning of the church, Jesus' command was so simple. Jesus called us to go. That's what he said in commissioning his followers as well as us in the Great Commission, Matthew 28, verses 19 and 20. Jesus said these words. He said, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands that I've given to you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. You see, the directive of Jesus was simple. He tells us, go and make disciples. He called us out to be the church, to be his hands and his feet. The church was never supposed to be about staying inside the four walls of a building, but we were called to be involved in our community, to be involved in our neighborhoods, in our schools, and even in our workplaces. And look, I think if there's something that this pandemic has shown us, it's just how important we remember that when we hear the word church, we should hear the word ecclesia, and we should see ourselves as the called out ones. That's what the church was for the first 250 years. It was a movement of people, and there was no specific building that they went to. When the church began, in fact, listen to what it says in Acts 2:42-47. It says this, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together, and they had everything in common. They were unified around a common goal. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day, they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes. They ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. And it says this, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. You know, when I read that, and then I think about what the church, what the Big C Church has been like over these past couple of months, and I believe what is ahead for us as the church, what I see is the Acts 2 church. And as a pastor, it's really exciting to think about, honestly, because I've already seen some of these things happening. I've had families in our community reach out to me during this time and say, how can we help others at North Fort Worth? We've got financial resources. We want to help. And that's what we read that they did in the Acts 2 church in verse 44. They helped those in need. It says every day they met together. Well, guess what? That's what we've been doing too, haven't we? We've found new ways to connect and continue to meet together, whether that's been through Compass Daily or Zoom gatherings or community group online gatherings or even a rooted group that is meeting right now online. Like self-quarantining hasn't stopped us from finding new ways to gather. I really believe that really this time has only served to unify us even more as a church. Our mission has never wavered. I think it has only served to strengthen the fact that for us, it's about navigating people to God, and we've seen that continue to happen. You know, I was just thinking about at all of our campuses, we've seen baptisms taking place. We've seen friends and family members who have either never attended church or have been turned off the church in the past, accept invitations. They've joined watch parties, and they've become actively engaged. And what we've learned and what we continue to see is that it's not the building that makes the church, but instead it's the people. You know, I came across this quote from author and pastor Carey Nieuwhof, who said this: church buildings, technologies, and locations are a means to an end, not an ends in themselves. They did not make you grow or reach new people. They can help you grow, but they are not your secret sauce. You know, when I read that, I thought, how true is this during the time that we're in? COVID-19, it forced us out of our buildings, but it did not stop us from being the church that Jesus has called us to be all along. And I believe because of that, it will only serve to make us better and help us grow even stronger in the weeks and the months and even the years ahead, because we can look back on what we learned over the last couple of months in 2020, and we can remind ourselves that the church is not a building, but it's the people. You know, over the next couple of weeks and months, as we begin to consider gathering back together, more and more people will start returning to a building. That's where the church meets. But my hope is that we never fail to remember what we've learned during this time. You know, when Jesus ascended into heaven and then Peter preached the first sermon, it says that on that day, 3,000 people got added to the church. The church exploded with growth, and that's what it would look like for the first 250 years. The church was this movement. But along the way, something happened, and it ceased to be a movement, and somewhere along the way, it became more about a location. In fact, somewhere along the way, the translation of the word church in the Bible moved from ecclesia to this German word, Kirche. And here's the problem with that. Those two words, they mean completely different things. What you have to understand is this: a kirche is a location. An ecclesia is a purposeful gathering of people. And look, you can lock the doors of a kirche, but you cannot lock the doors of a movement of Jesus. On March 15th, the doors of our locations were locked, and we began worshiping in our homes in thousands of different locations. But you know what I love? What I love is that didn't stop us from being the church. I believe it actually strengthened us, and it only served to prepare us for what is ahead. And look, as a campus, we definitely face some challenges. We aren't sure when we can get back into Eaton High School, and so it's forcing us to have to move locations of where we meet. But what I know for sure is it doesn't mean that it will stop us from doing what we're called to do and go where we're called to go as God has called us to. Compass North Fort Worth, right now we've got this incredible opportunity to be the hands and feet of Jesus to our community, and there are so many ways in which we are going to continue to do that. Like, I want you to hear this today. Some locked doors at Eaton High School won't stop us from meeting together. It might just mean that it looks a little bit different for a while. In fact, I want to challenge you today, and I want to encourage some of you to start gathering in your home with others. Maybe start some home church gatherings. Invite your neighbors or your family to worship with you at your house on Sunday mornings. Have host tailgate parties, host online watch parties. I want to encourage you to join us in doing that and being the hands and feet of Jesus to those around you. I also want to encourage you, if you're able and willing, to worship with us in person when we begin worshiping in person on Saturday nights at our Roanoke campus, and bring other people with you. Compass North Fort Worth, if there's anything that we've learned during this time, that even though we didn't see it coming, what we learned is that we don't need a building to be the church. And so as we close today, I want to challenge you with something that I came across several years ago that was written by another pastor named Kerry Shook. He called it the One Life Declaration. And as I read this today, I want to invite you to join me in declaring this as well. And this is what he wrote. He wrote these words: "We believe with all our hearts that 2,000 years ago, the sacrifice of one life, Jesus Christ, changed our one lives for all of eternity. We believe that Christ gave his life for every life. Therefore, it is impossible to measure the value of one life. So we declare that as long as there is one life that has never experienced the love of Christ, as long as there is one child without clean water, one child who has no relationship with their mother or father, one family with no shelter, one man who is homeless and hungry, one teenager who feels hopeless, one person who has never heard the gospel, then we will do whatever it takes with whatever we have with our one and only life to help one more person experience Christ's love. We refuse to live in a selfish bubble in our own little world by closing our eyes to the hurting and the hopeless around us. We refuse to come to the end of our life and realize we missed our one and only chance with our one and only life to give our all to the one who gave his life for us. That declaration, as we close, I want to ask you today, are you willing to commit to that today? I want to encourage you, if you're willing to commit to that, to type the words, "I declare," in the comment section right now. Compass North Fort Worth, let's continue to be the called out ones that Jesus tasked us to be. Let's serve others. Let's be generous. Let's make a difference in the lives of others by continuing to navigate people to God during this time by being the church. You know, if there's anything that we didn't see coming during this time, but what we've learned is this, is that we didn't need a building to be the church. The church isn't about a building. The church is about the people. So Compass North Fort Worth, let me just challenge you this week. Be the church. Be the hands and the feet of Jesus. Navigate people to God. Point people to God in your interactions, in those opportunities that God places in front of you. Would you pray with me? Father, today we come to you and I'm thankful for just what you've been doing in our church family over these last 8 weeks, God. How you've moved and how you've worked. God, you've provided, you've shown up in so many ways, and what we've learned in the midst of it all is we don't need a building to be the church. God, that the church is about the people. And God, I pray this week that you would give us opportunities to be your hands and your feet. That this week that we would do whatever we can with the time that we have to help point other people to you. God, help us to take this commission that you've given us seriously, to go and to make disciples, to be the hands and the feet of Jesus. God, we thank you for your love for us. We pray all this in your name. Amen.